Hello everyone, welcome back to Cycling Culture Club Connections. Today we've got a banger of an episode. I sit down with Red Walters, the current Grenadian national champion, and he takes us through what it really takes to race at an elite level and compete year after year in your national championships. As a national champion you have a lot of responsibility, a lot of opportunity, but also Red tells us how he's come up against his own adversity, embracing his own ethnicity and understanding how actually his national championships is not only a test of physical challenge but mental challenge. I think compared to a lot of other races, the Pan-American Championships is actually very diverse, but as you'll hear when we get into it, that has its advantages and its disadvantages, its challenges and its opportunities. Red is seriously eloquent, really great to speak to, and a really good racer. If you don't follow him already, check him out on Instagram. He creates great content, funny, relatable, and it's great to have him as part of our contributor network. This episode marks the start of season 2, and the episodes that follow will continue to dive into the diverse stories from our contributors and beyond. Red, thank you so much for your time. I'm really glad we got to do this together. Let's dive into it. Hey Red, good evening.
Hey Miles, how you doing?
Yeah, all good, thanks, all good. You coming at me from another hotel room on the road?
Yeah, another room. This time I'm in Calpe, Spain, so I'm out here for a 4-week training block. No racing this time, but definitely grateful for some more sunshine.
Nice. I gotta say, like over the winter, seeing you riding in some absolutely impossible conditions in the UK was both an inspiration and a complete detraction. I was like, yeah, rather you than me, Red.
Yeah, there was definitely some rough days back home, just like getting home and thawing out like in a bath or something, spending ages just to feel my feet again. But yeah, glad that's behind me, I think, for this season.
Yeah, good. I mean, rather you than me, but I mean, why do you do it to yourself? Presumably, you've got a decent indoor setup. Like, why do it?
You know what? So I broke my jaw in August, and I had to do like turbo for 8 weeks straight, and that was okay. But now I can't even bear to look at the turbo anymore. I've just completely like maxed it out in my brain.
Yeah, that makes sense. I remember the horror crash, and maybe we'll get into it a bit later, because as much as everything you went through, like you've managed to recover like incredibly well. And I don't know if it's just because you're young and fit and keen, but it seems like you're back to fighting fit like super quick.
Yeah, I think there was a bit of luck involved. I had a good surgeon as well, but also just like I think it was nice to have like long-term goals that I could just like like laser focus on, and that just made, I guess it almost made it easier to recover.
Nice. So how long was the recovery overall? Would you say it was 8 weeks?
Um, I guess it was 6 weeks off the bike completely, because the main problem was there was also a knee injury, which actually took longer to fully heal, and it's not 100%, it's like 99% now. But that's like what probably stopped things more. But then, so it was 6 weeks off the bike, and then I think 8 weeks of turbo trainer only, and that was because they said, you can ride, but if you do crash, the risk of something happening while the chin and the jaw's not fully healed is like really bad. So don't do that. So I listened to their advice, although I did probably come onto the bike maybe a week earlier than they actually recommended. But I was like, oh, I'm sure I'm healing faster than normal, so it'll be fine.
Oh yeah.
And
What's
then
the week between friends?
Wait, exactly. What's the week between friends? Yeah, and then from there it was almost training as normal with just some extra like rehab work on the knee, to get it just stronger.
Yeah, okay. I think a lot of us take for granted like how much your body really like needs to repair, and how like all that physio work, also prehab, I keep seeing that word like banded about a bit, like prehab, like what's the work that you can do before an injury that stops you from getting one. Like it feels like we all, maybe except you, neglect that day to day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the past, I think that prehab thing is really important. I never used to do gym, um, just general strength work, and there was a couple of injuries, like more like chronic injuries as opposed to crash-related injuries. But now I'm working with like a strength coach, and he's all about building strength globally, all over the body. And I'm pretty confident it's probably saved me from some worse injuries at some crashes that I've had.
Yeah. Well, everyone listening, take note. That's the way to keep young, I think.
Yeah. It sure helps a little bit.
Yeah. So Red, I mean, you've been part of this group for a little while now. Some of the listeners will know you, some of them won't. I'd love it if you could give a quick off the cuff intro, like who are you? How did you come to be involved? And anything else the listeners might want to know about you.
Yeah. I'm so bad at these intros. There's always hard to be concise, but I'll try. So I'm Red Waters. I'm a road and track cyclist. I race. Well, I'm trying to race at the highest level possible, and that's like my journey. I got involved through this. I guess I first got in touch with you through Van Rysel, and then it just sort of went from there. And I did the intro piece, and I guess it's just sort of slowly been building from there. It's nice you had the group with the other guys, just to I feel like it's one thing having seeing the posts, and actually being in a group, even though I'm getting a bit of the the old group chat anxiety, but it's nice to see the other guys talking and stuff, and even if I'm not always chatting.
No, that's good, and I think the group chats do one of two things for people, right? Like they either come out of their shells completely and feel comfortable to contribute at any level, or you can sit on the sideline and absorb and read and experience without contributing directly. But I think what's really nice about that WhatsApp group, particularly from me having set it up, is watching everyone come together and finding their synergies, and even just seeing all the names on the group. It's I don't know if you know what I mean, but it's sort of almost confirms what we're trying to do with this space. And there's 50 odd people in that group, and I could see it getting even bigger. So no, thanks for being part of it.
Yeah, no, I mean, no, happy to be. It's it's cool to be part of something like that.
Yeah, I guess the reason I reached out to you initially, aside from Van Rysel stuff, was seeing what you'd managed to achieve throughout your racing journey, but definitely in recent years at least, was just remarkable. And if I can speak honestly, seeing a person of color race at a really high level is still not a super common thing. You have to go looking for it. And I suppose throughout my journey with Cycling Culture Club so far, I've tried to follow and find as many people as possible. But even as somebody relatively in the know, it's still an unusual thing. So I guess I'm interested from you, Red, what does your journey look like? How did you find cycling? How did you find racing? And what is the racing scene? And feel free to take these questions piece by piece. I'm going to throw them all at you at once. But what does the racing scene look like from the inside these days? Is it diverse? Does it need work? Keen to get your thoughts.
So I've just had a little. Hello.
You back?
Sorry, I can hear you, but the video's gone. I assume mine's still recording, so it's not the end of the world.
It should find it on your side, but you can't see me.
Oh no, you're back. There we go. So I think it's just it's literally on the cusp of the Wi-Fi connection, but.
Fine. Yeah.
There we go.
It records locally, so hopefully, once you leave the call, it'll ask you to upload.
Yeah.
And then it'll upload it after, and then it will link them up in the background through some magic or other. I don't know how it works, but it works well. So it should be fine. As long as you can hear me okay.
Yeah, sorry. Could you go through the question again? So I missed the second half of it.
No worries. I'm just going to make a note. 8:30. So yeah, I was saying, as a seeing a person of color racing at a really high level is still not super common. So I guess when I first reached out to you, like around the Van Rosel stuff, but also with this project in mind, I was just interested because, as I say, you don't see a lot of black people racing, and when you do, it's because you've really sort of looked out for it and found the people like I have. So I guess my question is, from your perspective, like what did your journey into cycling and finding racing look like, and what does the sport look like from the inside, from a diversity perspective?
Yeah. So I started. I probably not that uncommon a story. Like I was pretty. I wasn't very active, really into gaming, and that was up to sort of the end of secondary school. But I had been a little bit sporty when I was younger, so I wanted to find a new like physical outlet. And for whatever reason, I cannot pinpoint cycling appealed to me. I've done a couple. I say that I've done a couple of like my school had organised a couple of events where they did some fun stuff. But anyway, I decided I wanted to get into cycling. I made a deal with my dad, or if I got a certain number of grades at the GCSEs, then he'd buy my first bike. So that's like where it all started. And then straight away I was like, I want to race. I think I did a race the week that I got my first bike, and I got like second last. I got lapped 4 times. But somehow that was like what hooked me. That like really, really hooked me. And from then it's just been like a steady, a steady progression of like climbing through the ranks, getting fitter, getting stronger, and constantly like elevating my goals, I guess, as I achieve them. And then on the diversity side, I feel like I could speak from so many different like angles, depending on where I'm currently thinking. Because there's just so many different aspects to it. But to try and speak broadly, I think for a lot of the time I didn't really think about it too much for a really long time, actually, especially because, so I grew up in London I lived there until I was 9 or 10, I think, which is, as the UK goes, pretty diverse. So, school and everything, it wasn't really like that. It wasn't too bad in terms of diversity. And then we ended up moving down to Southampton, or near Southampton, Hampshire, which is not diverse at all. Like in my school year, at that point, there was like one other black guy, and that was it. So I was quite used to being the only black guy in most social situations. So then going into cycling, it's like I said, I didn't even think about it. And then as you go on, you do more racing, and then you realise that like you've done a season, and you've bumped into like 2 other black guys, or 2 other of any other, any kind of diversity or ethnic background. So yeah, it's just to speak broadly, there's not a lot of diversity. And I'm trying to think like how does that? It's one of those things you can either. I think if you think about it too much, it probably can negatively impact the racing. So it's almost like there's an incentive in my head to not think about it too much. But that's like diversity broadly speaking. But then, if you think about it in terms more of like the racism side or like the racial bias side, that's one of those things where it seems to come in peaks and troughs, where I'll forget about it for ages, and then something will happen. I'm like, oh man, it just reminds you, just like, oh, actually, that's not so good. But
would you mind? It doesn't have to be a personal example, but would you mind giving me an example of like that bias side? That's just interesting to me.
yeah, I mean, I think the worst thing, I suppose I'm fortunate that there haven't been many, or at least many that I can remember, like overtly, racist things that have been said to me. But it's always like the little things where someone will do something that could easily be passed as just they're not a nice person, or they're just like, just not a great guy. But when it happens like enough times, you're like, that just, and some of those times have to be some kind of discrimination. So, I mean, to give an example, it's really hard off the top of my head, but just, for example, let's say in teams, for example, not making a selection for a race despite being stronger than a lot of the guys that got selected, or I don't know, or even like, I guess in a race, when you're maybe at a lower level, when I was trying to apply to races, and I wouldn't get accepted entries. And I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. That's a bit weird. And I don't want to accuse. I'm really like on the passive side of I try not to accuse anyone of that kind of thing, because it's you can't really prove it. So it's like, yeah, it's a tricky one, and I'm sure, like, that's not something that just I experience. I'm sure you experience it. It's like it's pretty complex. It's just that's my side of it in cycling.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think one thing that everyone who is from an underrepresented group will relate to is that lived experience of having to justify just slightly more than their contemporaries as to why you're there. So, I guess speaking a little bit to your examples, but like, you might be stronger than the other guys, but for whatever reason, maybe it is race, maybe it isn't. There's you weren't made for that selection, and from all the reasoning you can take from it, that makes no sense, and it often comes down to a justification that is this a race thing? You ask that question, right? And I think we've all been there. But as you say, you can't prove it, and 9 times out of 10, it isn't worth raising as an altercation in that scenario, because you're unlikely to win. You are definitely going to make a scene. You are definitely not going to make your life easier moving forward. So all of these things sort of build together into a narrative in your head, or certainly in my head, when you're like, I just let it go.
Yeah.
It'll be what it'll be. And I think there's a power to that. There's being the bigger person in that situation is really powerful. But I think equally, I'd love to see the sport in a place where, that doesn't even need to cross your mind. That, fairness permeates everything we do, and race doesn't come into it. Unfortunately, that isn't the sport in which we live, and in which we participate. But I think, and I might be optimistic, but I think that change will come as diversity grows. So as we get to the point where you and me and many others in Cycling Culture Club and in the wider community, as we start to become less of the anomalies in the sport and in racing, I'm hopeful that those incidents that you describe become less and less.
And that is, I completely agree. And it's funny, the last race I did, it's the Tour of Sharjah, which is the next Emirate state from Dubai, so it's in that region. And that was probably, aside from races like the Caribbean Champs or Pan-American Champs, that was the most diverse race I've been to. There was teams from Rwanda, there was teams from Iraq, there were teams like there was a lot of national teams from close to that region geographically, and it was really nice to see not just representation, but like representation at a really high level. And it's like there are some of these guys who haven't got trade teams, but they're actually really strong, and they're easily strong enough to be in that position. And like all they need is just that exposure to show that they've got the power. I mean, some of these guys are like, they could be, I don't want to say they could be world tour, because that's like a thing for around, but they're like seriously strong. And I hadn't even known who they are because they hadn't had the chance to race at that level. But then on the flip side, there was also that reminder that it's like there is that element of disrespect. And I think it helps for me that I speak English as my first language. But for the guys who don't speak English as their first language or don't speak English at all, it's like, it's this really like subtle thing that even if someone didn't speak English as their first language, they wouldn't pick up on these like subtle tones or subtle things of the way people are talking to them. But I noticed that like a lot, which was pretty disappointing to see. And again, it's hard to really pinpoint because it was just dotted around here and there. But you just see like, yeah, it's like a tone, just a disrespectful notion from some of the European teams or some of the English teams. And it's like, it's not everywhere. It's not even the majority, but every now and then I see it and it just leaves and that's not, to be fair, that's not just that race. That's just like, sorry, that's just an extension of what I already tend to see, but I suppose it was more obvious.
Yeah, so I think there's 2 points there. Um, so I'll take the latter one first. So that sort of reaction to people who don't have, English as a first language or English at all, unfortunately, is not just a cycling problem.
Yeah.
That's just unfortunately that's just discrimination problem, probably worldwide, um, and definitely disappointing to see as you describe. Um, but I think also feeds into some of the more, um, I suppose it's subtle biases that we all have and that manifest themselves in scenarios like that. So, for example, when someone turns up to a group ride on a bike that you don't deem to be at the level of a group ride, like a lot of people, myself included, even if it goes through my mind and not out of my mouth, makes me think, I'm not sure they're experienced enough to be here because they're not on a certain level of bike. In most cases, completely unfair. I've had my legs torn off by people on bikes a quarter of my value, and it makes no difference once the legs start turning right. But I think a lot of cyclists have that bias, and that elitism in the sport definitely comes through. And I think it's the same with the language thing. There's this assumption that that person doesn't have the same feelings or skills or you know right to be there. And I think that's something that we all have to try and work to change, even if it's just to dispel, you know, one person at a time. Because as we say, like some of those guys are plenty strong enough. Um, and all they need is the opportunity to show that on the big stage, and they'll have their chance hopefully.
I'm just
Yeah.
sorry. Go on.
No, it's right. You go.
I was to say just off the back of the first thing you said, it's interesting because I was thinking about this a lot the other day. Well, it's similar to what you're saying about the bike thing, where it's like I spend all my time training to try and be a better cyclist, a stronger cyclist, better at racing, and I place a large. Obviously, I end up placing a large amount of my personal value, right or wrongly, probably wrongly, but a large amount of my personal value in being a good bike racer. So then sometimes it's quite easy to find that value you place on yourself or that value system bleeds across into how you judge other people. And I've been quite actively recently trying to, counteract that, where it's like you find yourself subconsciously, I guess, it's weird. It's weird to say, but like assuming people are better or not. It's not. It's more subtle than that. But do you know what I mean? Like because you value yourself based on being a good cyclist, you end up seeing someone who's a great cyclist and he must be a really great person, and you value anyway. Point is trying not to have that value outward, even though it's an internal value system. Mm. Right. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, yeah. No, I totally agree. But like even just training, it's like I kind of joke with my mum that I'll see like two other brown faces a year riding training in my home roads. Like not even an exaggeration. Like there will be less than five a year, unless it's someone I know. Um, and then yeah, like you said over there, Dubai. It's just like I don't want to say just Dubai. It's the same when I go to Caribbean Champs, which I love that race every year because it's like this is like I really just feel like I'm yeah at home, like part of it's just yeah so much more welcomed in the peloton in that respect. Mm. Yes, yes, and thank you for saying Grenada, because I honestly I've given up at this point. The amount of people who say Grenada, and for those who don't know, Grenada is I think a province in Spain, or at least that's how it's pronounced. But oh man, and I honestly I've given up because everyone says Grenada. I'm like yeah, okay, yeah, Grenada, but yeah. Oh right, yeah, yeah. It's certainly something I'm really proud, like really proud to be like national champion of Grenada, especially because it's the country that like most people haven't even heard of. So it's not like I'm not just the national champion. I'm also, I guess, bringing awareness to a country that, like I said, most people haven't even heard of. But I also think it's important that I'm aware that even though I win, and I'm very proud of that, and I worked really hard to get that result. I think I have to be aware that there are advantages that I've had having like cycling or grown up cycling in the UK and having access to those races and like the training facilities. I think not to like take away from myself, but I think it's just important to be aware that there is an advantage. Um, I just I'm struggling to find the exact words, but yeah, there's an advantage, and I think it's like I try to I guess share that knowledge because I think in cycling knowledge is like it can really be like the limiting factor to people's training and their performance. Just little things. I mean, there's thousands of things, but things like fueling your training, and I talk about how many grams of carbs I'm eating an hour, and I'll be at 120. And if people haven't been exposed to that sort of I don't say marketing, but that sort of information, and it has sort of come in over the last probably decade. And there are some people who are racing on like a banana an hour or like 20 grams of carbs an hour, and it's like it's just the difference in performance. That one thing is huge, and there's dozens of things that are like that. So yes, sorry. In summary, I'm proud to have won, but I'm also aware that I guess aware that it's a not 100% level playing field. But I'm also trying to help by sharing as much of my knowledge as I can. Um, and just yeah, I've offered to like help any of the guys with the training, the coaching, and share what I know. Sure, no worries.
Hey,
Hey, got you.
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Weird. My browser was like, "You've got no data. Like you've used up too much data or something." I was like, "What? I've never had that before."
Oh. Oh.
Um, so I'm hoping. I think yours will always capture, but I'm hoping you got my bit back then. But we'll work through it. All
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna start like you've just finished your answer. And say that bit again. All right.
Sure.
So yeah, I think leveling the playing field is one of the most powerful things you can do in your position. I mean, it's massive for you to not only acknowledge that you have some advantage and some, dare I say it, privilege that others don't have, and you're using that to your betterment. And I think there's something really important in just sort of digging into that, because one of the topics and one of the words I use all the time is allyship. You know, how do we build ourselves allies in this space, people who want to help diversify cycling? There's plenty of allies in our community already, like people who aren't black, aren't Asian, aren't from an underrepresented group necessarily, but have a strong urge to change the status quo. So that's what I would define as allyship. But I guess in your particular scenario, like helping your contemporaries and your colleagues who are racing with you to like race better, is a testament to the sort of person you are, because some people would take that advantage and run with it. And
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, yeah. I don't, I do a little, and I don't want to overstate it, but it's nice to help, where I can. But yeah, there definitely is. It's nice to see, like, and I don't want to claim to, be the the one who's helped everyone, but it's also nice to see at the same time, in parallel with my progression, a lot of those guys have really progressed, like, to even faster rates. Like, there's one guy, Correga, who's last year he came to Pan-American Championships for the first time, and it's just like, yeah, it's nice to see just the progression of them as well as me, and it's just
yeah, no, it's amazing. So educate a layman a bit, because I'm a bit outside of the racing world these days. But so you have a national championship, and you also compete at the Pan American Championship, because I guess that's the umbrella of your own national championship. Is that right?
Yeah, so there's the national championship, which is just for the country, and then Pan American Champs is for the whole continent. So for cycling, they come together North and South America. So that's all of the Americas from Canada to Argentina as a championship, and that's quite a big one actually, because that's like the points for that are really big, and it qualifies for other things like it can qualify for the Olympics. There's like 1 year where it qualifies for the Olympics, but it's quite and obviously there's being able to say national champion is really cool, and I'm proud of that. But being able to say like champion of a whole, looking at like I can point on a map and be like that whole bit, that's like that is really cool.
Yeah, that's nuts. I mean, that's a lot of different countries as well. That's not like it's not just a handful of nations competing for that title. That is tens and tens of nations, and loads of languages, loads of nationalities, diversities. I mean, that must be quite something to see, actually. How many of them have you participated in? Sorry for the interruption. Miles from the future here. Red had a few little technical issues. We tried to get back up and running as quickly as possible. Hopefully it doesn't interrupt the flow too much. I think we do miss an answer to his question here, so apologies. Sometimes technology isn't your friend. Anyway, back to the episode. Thanks for tuning in. So I guess with all those countries coming together as one big like continental shootout, like that must be quite a spectacle to see, like all of those countries, all of those people, all those ethnicities, and to be able to race and try and find one person who's on top of that whole pile, like that's kind of massive. Like, I guess you're literally coming up against world tour riders at that point, right?
Yeah, the couple. So not all the world tour riders go, because obviously there's a huge amount of world tour riders from Colombia. I think there are obviously a few from Ecuador, Venezuela, and some of them go, but it's not the full. It's not everyone like you might get in European champs where because it's so close, it's easy. I think because of the distance, and a lot of the guys will be based in Europe. I mean, even for me, it's like it's usually a big trek depending on where it is in South America. 1 year it took, because of flight delays, 50 hours to get from door to door. So it's like it's a proper journey. But yeah, no, it's really cool to be like beating all those nations, and a lot of the times like you end up making friends, and every year it's like you see those guys that you haven't seen for a year. So it's nice in that respect. But then like from the racing, it's just like same sensation as we were saying about being in Dubai and the UAE, where it's like just everyone looks like you, more or less. It's like it just feels like just racing at home. But it's a proper like it's obviously having the being a champion of the continent like that. It's a pretty big thing, and same for the guys who don't know, in cycling, if you're a national champion, you get to wear a special kit with your flag on your jersey for the duration or until the next national champs, and for continental champs, obviously you get the same thing. So that's like the prestige of that is huge, which makes it all the more disappointing when you get second place, which is what I got last year, where it's just like
second. Yeah,
just that tiny bit off. But this year it's coming. In fact, just today, funnily enough, my teammate Correga, the guy I was talking about earlier, he sent me the location for this year's one, which is in Uruguay, Punta del Este, which is like, I think that's quite far south actually. I haven't looked at flights yet, but I know that's going to be a big shift, I think.
Yeah, it's going to be big. I've been to Uruguay before, but it's a big country. You might end up on some sort of epic bus journey.
Yeah, yeah,
But I mean, crazy man! Like second place, that is insane. And I know you said some of the riders don't go right, but ultimately that is, you're second in the state, in all of those states, all of those countries.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I had no idea, but congratulations, it's massive.
No,
I know
thank you.
you'll be disappointed, but you shouldn't be. I mean, that's wild. Um, the bit you said about like feeling at home again, I think just to labour that on that a little bit. Do you think the white riders who go feel like us everywhere else?
That's a good question. Do you mean the white riders who race like in Europe, or the white riders who
Ah,
come to Pan American Champs?
that one who come to the Pan American Champs.
Uh yeah, that's yeah. I would guess not so much because it's not the norm, and it's still it's still probably, I don't want to say 50% white riders, but not maybe like 30% white riders. There's still in South America, like there's still a fair amount. So it's not like it's 100% brown faces, but yeah, I'd never thought of it on that side of things.
Yeah, I just wondered if there's any like recognition from those riders that you know. I wonder if it's even crosses their mind that they are maybe not quite the minority, but definitely like verging on the minority in that sort of scenario.
Mm.
I
I think
like
they
it to an
must do.
yeah,
'Cause I think you'd struggle not to notice it.
yeah. I wonder if that has any sort of impact over that short period because you're only there for a week or whatever you're there for, I suppose, a few days. Um, but I liken it when I've been to African or Asian countries with partners of mine and they're fair skinned and I feel right at home in anywhere in that part of the world, really, pretty much. Like no one really notices me. I blend right in, particularly when I've got a tan, and
Yeah,
they always super stand out, right? And that's
yeah,
yeah, it's just funny how the norm for one person can be the complete opposite for somebody else.
yeah, yeah. I have the exact same thing actually. My partner's fair skinned, so when we've gone to Grenada, it's like she stands out massively.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be interesting to get their perspective, um, what that feels like, and also whether because they never feel that detachment like we do, they probably, and I'm making a lot of assumptions here, sweeping assumptions. I'm sure the comment section is going to be mad, but the they never get that feeling of like they're coming home, like you and I have described in the Middle East, like because they haven't felt the opposite. They don't necessarily notice the difference when they are amongst here amongst their home.
Yeah,
um yes, interesting. Gonna dive into the psychology and philosophy behind all that in a minute, I think. Cool. So I think your journey is super interesting and inspirational, and I've really enjoyed like following along and watching how you've grown as a rider and achieving amazing results. And I've actually been quite humbled. You're super humble yourself. So when I asked you to come and be a contributor, I sort of wondered, oh no, he might be too busy or too big to give his time to something like this, but you never were, and I was always super grateful for that. So thank you. I also had a conversation with I don't know if you know Laurie Sharp.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I've raced. Well, I've been at races with her a few times.
Yeah, and she was similarly humble, and again racing at a really high level, but was very happy to give her time and share her story. So I guess I look forward to digging in a bit more with you, Red, and figuring out, like, you know, how do we tell more of your stories on the platform so that others can be inspired to race a bike at some point.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm happy to. I'm really happy to be part of it. I think I need to sit down at some point and maybe commit some words to paper just so I can be a little bit more concise. I feel like I don't quite get to. I'm not quite as good at you know what I mean, at saying what I want to say. So I think I need to get some words down.
No, you've done really well, so I wouldn't worry. But we can definitely do that. And I don't know, some people find different mediums good for their personality, and that can vary hugely. So I guess that's what I'm still trying to figure out with Cycling Culture Club. Like, everyone wants to contribute, but how do you facilitate that? You know, how do you give people a space where they feel comfortable to do that? And maybe it's like this, maybe it's not, maybe it is on paper, maybe it's in some other different medium. But I think that's sort of the magic of it. Like, anyone can contribute in any which way, because there really is no boundaries at the moment, which is really good. I had a couple of final questions, if that's okay.
Yeah.
The first one is about the UK racing scene. I don't know how much of your year you spend racing here, but my impression is that the racing scene here is not in a good place. But that is from an outsider perspective. I haven't raced myself in years, so I guess your opinion on that, like, is it truly dead, amateur racing in the UK, or is that just hearsay? And if it is dying, you know, what do you think the UK could do better?
Yeah, well, I'll put it this way: the last probably 3 years, me and my mates will say to ourselves something along the lines of, "Oh, it can't get much worse than this." The scene it's so dead, it's really bad, and then the next year, it somehow gets a little bit worse. And that maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it really is just like it's not bouncing back, or it's a lack of racing, but it's not just like the racing itself. There's a lack of, I think, enthusiasm from riders, or at least at the level that it was maybe a few years ago. I mean, that one example, because it's on my mind, my mates were talking about it the other day. Two of our local race series, or one of our local ones, Goodwood, for example, they only do racing for cats 2 and 3 now. So if you're a first cat or elite cat, you don't get to race. I think it's the same story in Hillingdon. I mean, that's just one thing. That's like one small issue on the list of things. But I think I couldn't even pinpoint where to start. I guess from a rider's perspective, it's a lack of racing, I think. But I know that's like that's the result of so many other aspects.
Yeah, I mean, I think I won't get into the nitty gritty of, you know, how hard it is for people to put on races, because I do appreciate that. But I guess what we're not creating is an infrastructure or a pipeline for people to move up. And particularly, you know, you cited a couple of the I suppose the London adjacent races, and as you mentioned right at the beginning, like, London is a great example of diversity in cycling. And if you can't make those races accessible to Londoners, then what hope have you got? And if you're did you say there was only 2 and 3 at Hillingdon?
Yeah.
Which is mad. I mean, where do the Cat 4s race? Where do the choppers go?
Well, I think there might be a fourth. I think there's fourth cat racing as well. Okay. But I think part of the issue maybe is like the club culture that was, even when I started cycling not that long ago, although it does seem to the years go pretty quick, but even, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, the club culture was really big. You know, there was still a large group of every club that would be racing, and then because of that, there was a group that would be putting on a race each year. So every club would have their own race, and that would contribute hugely to the calendar. And that's what you see, you know, in other places. Like, you look at France, which I think is still a pretty good example. The club system is so strong, but and I almost think you can't compare to countries like that because cycling is so much more popular generally. It's got like the general public behind it. Whereas over here, you try and put a race on, you're fighting not only against the general public, you're fighting against the local council. It's like, it's just an uphill battle on all sides. So, yeah, it's a much harder challenge to put on a race in the first place. And I think, that brings about a whole load of other challenges.
Yeah, for sure. And, the incentive for somebody to put on a race is, becoming less and less. Like you say, it's a lot of energy to do it. So shout out to the race organizers who are still fighting the good fight, I guess.
Yeah.
Cool. So I guess one last question for you, Red, and it's the one I ask everybody on the close of the podcast. And that is, if you could give one piece of advice to somebody who's just got into cycling from an underrepresented group to keep cycling, stay in cycling, or start, what do you think it would be? Feel free to take a minute to think about it if you need it.
I would say don't be afraid to introduce yourself to new groups. Because I think as much as we talk about, the racial bias or the racism that does certainly exist, there is an overwhelming positive, or an overwhelming number of positive people who are so happy to help you and give their advice. I talk about when I started cycling, they were, so welcoming. Everyone, I have such fond memories of being on these club runs, and it's like these, just every weekend you rock up, you don't know who's going to turn up, you chat with random people, and it's just like that community. The point I'm making is that sometimes it feels like you don't know if it's there or you don't know what it's going to be like, but I would say the majority of the time it's actually pretty good.
Yeah, that's been my experience too. I mean, I'm lucky enough that I've never experienced any outright racism or anything like that, and quite the opposite actually. Been very welcomed, and the only thing that I've noticed is just a lack of other faces like me, but that's not the club's fault necessarily. That can often be down to the demographic of the area you're in, or you mentioned Southampton. I live in Tunbridge Wells, both overwhelmingly white. So yeah, I mean it's just a byproduct of where you're based, but I think you're so right. Like community groups are the place to start, and if you can be that one conduit for somebody to stay in cycling because they see someone else who looks like them going out regularly, then that can become a self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Thank you so much for your time, mate. It's been really really good to dive in. I know we haven't spent that much time talking about this, so it's nice to sort of get your take on it and get your feel for it. And I think because of your background and because of your prowess as a racer, there's a really unique angle to this, and I think everyone's going to really enjoy listening to that. So thank you once again.
No, thank you for having me. I'm more than happy to share my experience. If it can help anyone in any way, then I'm happy. Yeah.
Good man. Well, good luck with the season ahead. We will wish you masses of luck. That number one at the Pan-Amercian Champs is yours for the taking. So
yeah,
I look forward to seeing how you fare. But yeah, keep in touch.
cool. Thanks a lot, mate. Cheers.
See you around.